It started with the basement door. I was coming home from a late shift, one of those days where the sky just presses on you like wet cement, and all you want is your couch, some leftover pasta, and silence. I parked the car, killed the engine, and noticed the faintest flicker of light through the basement window. It was subtle, like a TV glow. We don't keep a TV down there. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds longer than I should have. No real reason. Just a weight in my gut I couldn't place. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I'd just gotten better at reading the static. I walked inside. The hallway smelled faintly like men's cologne. One I don't wear. Something earthy and musky. Not offensive, but new. Unfamiliar. My wife had a candle collection bigger than most department stores, so I chalked it up to that. But that's how it begins, right? The small things you excuse. The tiny flashes of something off that you convince yourself are nothing because it's easier. She was upstairs in our bedroom, lying across the bed in one of her oversized sweatshirts. Calm. Too calm. I asked her if she'd been down in the basement. She didn't even look up from her phone. Just said, "Nope." Like it was the dumbest question in the world. I didn't push. Just nodded and went down there myself. It was cold and smelled like laundry detergent and something faintly metallic. The TV was off, but the remote was still warm. There was a half-empty bottle of water on the table. A black tank top, too large to be hers, slung over the back of a chair. No dust on it like it had just been placed there. I stared at it for a long time, then took a picture and shoved it into my back pocket. I didn't confront her that night. I made dinner. She didn't eat. Said she already had a late lunch. She smiled a lot that evening, kept glancing at her phone, then locking it quickly when I got near. That night, she said she was too tired to sleep next to me. Claimed her back hurt, wanted the guest room mattress. I didn't argue. At 2:37 a.m., I heard the front door unlock. Not open. Unlock. And I heard the sound of footsteps retreating down the driveway. Fast. Heavy. I lay there, eyes open, hands clenched. I didn't move. I didn't chase. I just stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "She thinks I'm stupid." But I was already setting the trap. Tomorrow was going to be a different game. Morning came like a slap, bright, loud, and impossible to ignore. She was already in the kitchen when I got up, hair tied up, wearing that same old sweatshirt like it made her believable. She poured coffee like we weren't on the edge of something dangerous. Said good morning with a yawn that felt staged. I told her I'd be working from home. She blinked a little too fast, then asked why. I told her my boss was switching up schedules. She nodded, sipped her coffee, and avoided my eyes. She left the house around 10. Said she was going to the gym, then stopping by her sister's to help with baby stuff. Her sister doesn't have kids. She doesn't even like them. But I didn't flinch. I kissed her forehead and told her to have a good day. The second the door clicked shut, I pulled out the tiny tracker I'd bought 3 days earlier and opened the app. She drove 25 minutes. Not to a gym. Not to her sister's. She parked outside a modern townhouse complex in a part of the city I didn't even know she knew. I waited 10 minutes, then drove there myself and parked a few blocks away. I didn't get out, just watched. 40 minutes later, a man walked her out. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was huge. One of those bodies that looked like it was carved for protein powder ads. He wore a sleeveless hoodie and joggers. She laughed, loud, like I hadn't heard her laugh in a year. She touched his chest. He flexed, just slightly, then smirked at her like a comic book villain. That wasn't the worst part. As he turned to go back inside, she looked around, pulled out her phone, and typed something quickly. My phone buzzed. Just finished at the gym. Heading to Kayla's. Want me to pick up anything? I stared at the message until it blurred. Then I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table for over an hour. Not crying. Not raging. Just calculating. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a life she'd built in parallel to mine. A second existence where I was the ghost in her rearview mirror. She thought she was clever, but I was already 2 steps ahead. I printed the photo of the tank top from the basement, slid it under her pillow. Then I texted her, "We need to talk tonight." No emojis. No smiley face. She replied in under 10 seconds. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. Let her feel it now. Let her guess. She came home late. Not too late, just late enough to pretend it was innocent. That's how she plays it. Schemes just under the line of suspicion. Her face when she walked in was a masterclass. The perfect mix of, sorry I'm late, and, I hope he didn't notice. She dropped her bag at the door, gave me a too casual, hey, babe, and walked straight past me into the kitchen like she didn't just spend the afternoon in someone else's sheets. I watched her pour a glass of wine. No gym bag. No signs of a workout. No protein shake. Just wine and a lot of pretending. She came to sit across from me, legs folded under her, all cozy and false. I waited. I wanted her to open, confess something, anything. Instead, she took a sip and said, so, what did you want to talk about? I held up the photo, the tank top, the one from the basement. Her eyes flickered just for a second. That was all I needed. That one blink longer than necessary. Her mouth opened slightly, then shut. She stared at the picture like she didn't recognize it, even though we both knew she did. What is this? I asked. She leaned back, arms crossed, full defense mode. Looks like a shirt. What? Did a raccoon break in and do laundry? I didn't laugh. Try again. She stared at me, something sharp behind her smile now. Why are you going through the basement? That's where I keep all the crap you don't want to throw out. Is this about that? I leaned forward. You told me you haven't been down there. I didn't think I had. She snapped, then caught herself and softened her voice. Maybe I forgot. I've been stressed lately. That's when I saw it. The pivot. The manipulation starting to move under her skin. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Alex, baby, you've been working a lot. You barely sleep. You're overthinking everything. I swear. There's nothing going on. That would have worked once. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone and opened the app. The tracking history. Clicked on the address from earlier. Slid the phone across the table to her. She didn't touch it. She just stared. A full 10 seconds of silence. Then she let out the lightest scoff, rolled her eyes, and said the single most psychotic thing I've ever heard. Wow, you're spying on me now? That's cute. I felt my jaw tighten. Not from anger, from disbelief. You've been lying to me for months, I said. I saw him. The guy. The one with the stupid arms and that smug face. That's when it broke. She laughed. Laughed like I'd just told her a bad joke. You mean Liam? She said. Like it was his birthday party and I wasn't invited. Oh, baby, he's not what you think. I didn't speak. I wanted her to keep talking. She always does when she thinks she's smarter than everyone in the room. She stood up, walked slowly toward me, and whispered like it was a secret for just us. Be a good boy. Run before I break you. Her body shifted, shoulders square, jaw set. Not even pretending now. She was done playing wife. And in that moment, I saw him in her. The way she stood. The way her lips curled. Her bodybuilder smirked and flexed. I didn't flinch. I stared her down and said it quietly. I proved why combat always beats steroids. Her face changed. Like the game had shifted and she didn't know the rules anymore. But I did. And I wasn't running. She didn't like that I said it. Not the words, not the tone, not the calm behind them. She expected fire, shouting, maybe even tears. Something she could twist and flip and turn against me. But instead, she got silence. Cold, calculated silence. She tried to reset, walked back to her wine glass, took a sip, and leaned on the counter like this was just some awkward dinner conversation about mismatched socks. Her face was stone, but her hands told the truth. Tapping against the glass, twitchy, nervous. So, she said, dragging the word like gum on asphalt. Now what? You gonna cry and beg me to stay? Throw my stuff out the window? Tell all your little friends I'm a monster? I looked at her. Really looked at her. And what I saw wasn't guilt or shame or even regret. It was boredom. I stood up, slowly, walked over to the drawer and pulled out the envelope I'd been keeping for weeks. Receipts, screenshots, a copy of the hotel reservation under a fake name she'd used, Tessa G, to book the same room 6 different times. I tossed the envelope onto the table. She didn't even open it, just stared down at it like it was beneath her. You really went full detective, huh? She muttered, lips barely moving. I should have known you'd turn into one of those guys. I said nothing. You don't even get it? She snapped suddenly, loud now, voice sharp. You never asked why, did you? You just wanted to catch me. No, I said. I wanted to see how deep the rot went. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd get stuck there. Oh my God. You sound like a podcast. I gave you 6 years, I said, voice low. Built you a life. Made you part of every inch of mine. And you handed it off to a man who wears sunglasses indoors and flexes at gas stations. That hit something. She clenched her jaw just for a second. Liam, she said, almost proudly now. Makes me feel alive. You make schedules and eat leftovers. I didn't respond. I just took out my phone, opened the home security app, and hit play on the saved video. The moment she led Liam into our house through the back door. 2 nights ago, she thought I was asleep. No sound. Just their bodies moving through our kitchen. Her hand on his chest. His lips on her neck. The way she looked at him like she used to look at me. For a brief second, her face cracked. She reached for the phone. Reflex, instinct, but I pulled it back before she could touch it. I'm not angry, I said quietly. I'm done. She laughed again, but it was hollow this time. She was running out of lines. I'll tell people you were obsessed. Controlling. She hissed, eyes narrowing. You stalked me. You made me feel unsafe. There it was. The last grenade. I leaned in, inches from her face. And I'll show them the camera footage of you bringing your fantasy muscle doll into our home while I was upstairs sleeping. Let's play that game. Silence. For the first time, her mask slipped. Just a bit. She didn't respond. She just stared at me with eyes like ice, then turned, grabbed her wine glass, and walked out of the room like nothing had happened. But I knew. She was rattled, and I was just getting started. The next morning, she was gone. Not just out for a walk or running errands, gone. Closet half empty. Her phone charger missing. That sweatshirt she always wore? Folded on the bed, like a cheap apology. But no note, no goodbye, just absence. And for the first time in months, the silence in the house didn't choke me. It breathed. I didn't chase her. I didn't call. I didn't text. Let her sit in the mess she made. Let Liam lift weights around it. By noon, I'd already changed the locks. I wasn't petty, I was surgical. Her name off the lease, her key fob disabled, her name scrubbed from the emergency contact list at my job. I'd been planning this longer than she knew. I even set up a backup storage unit to keep the things I cared about, just in case she decided to get creative. By 3 p.m., she messaged. Can we talk? I stared at it for a good minute. My thumb hovered over ignore. But something in me wanted to see what lie she'd spin next. So I replied. Where? She picked a public spot. An upscale cafe in the city where everything costs too much and no one looks you in the eye. Classic move. A place she could control the optics. Be the calm, poised woman meeting her unstable ex. Maybe cry just enough to get a free muffin out of it. When I arrived, she was already there. Hair done. Makeup light but polished. Wearing an outfit she used to save for dinner parties. Not a wrinkle on her. But her eyes, they weren't smiling. I sat down. She didn't say hello. Just cut right in. You embarrassed me. I blinked. That's your opener? You had no right to track me. No right to humiliate me like that. You had no right to treat me like a doormat, I said flatly. You brought a stranger into our home. She rolled her eyes. It wasn't your home. It was a house. You just happened to be there. That line. It hit like a cold punch. And she said it so cleanly, like she was reading it off a script. I looked at her. Really looked. And realized something bone deep. She didn't regret what she did. She only regretted that I found out. I slid an envelope across the table again. This one heavier. Legal papers. Separation agreement. She didn't even flinch. Just opened it casually. Flipped through the pages. You're not getting the car, she said. I don't want it, I replied. Keep it. Give it to Liam. You'll need something to sit in while he explains to you why he's still texting 3 other women. That got her. A flicker. A twitch in her eye. She tried to cover it with a sip of tea, but her hands weren't as steady anymore. How do you know that? She asked. I leaned back. I don't guess, I said. I verify. She laughed. A short, bitter bark. You really think you've won, huh? No, I said. I think I survived. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and stared down at me like I was gum stuck to her shoe. This isn't over. I nodded. You're right. It's just beginning. And with that, I left her standing there, in her perfectly curated chaos. Let her sip her cold tea and figure out where the cracks were. Because from now on, I wasn't the one unraveling. She was 3 days past. No contact. No messages. Not a word. But she was watching. I knew she was. Quiet doesn't mean gone. Quiet means calculating. And right on cue, her name popped up again. But not on my phone. On my front door. It was Sunday morning. I was making coffee, just starting to feel the first breath of peace, when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, expecting maybe a delivery or a neighbor. It was her. Not dressed up this time. No makeup. Hoodie, jeans, hair in a messy bun. She looked like a different person. But that was part of the act. That's how she worked. Shape-shifting into whatever version of herself she thought I'd let inside. I didn't open the door. Just cracked the window beside it. What do you want? She looked up, and for the first time in this whole mess, she didn't look angry. She looked unsure. I just need to talk. Please. I considered it. I shouldn't have, but I did. I opened the door, just enough for her to step in. She walked slowly, like the floor might collapse under her. She looked around, noticed the new locks, the cleaned-up living room, the missing photos on the wall. You really erased me already? She asked. I didn't answer. I motioned to the couch. She didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the kitchen counter and put something down. A black box. Small. No label. What is that? I asked. It's everything, she said quietly. Everything you think you need to feel better. I opened it. Flash drive. Paperwork. Notes. Photos. Screenshots. Messages between her and Liam. Conversations she had with people I didn't even know existed. Stuff I never even uncovered. Confessions she never planned to say out loud. It was like she dumped her shadow onto my kitchen counter. Why now? I asked. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, because he's not who I thought he was. I waited. He's gone, she continued. Took money from me. Lied about his job. Lied about his name, I think. He wasn't real. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead I asked, and I'm supposed to what? Feel sorry for you? She looked at me with eyes that were trying to be soft. It didn't work anymore. I made a mistake. No, I said. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. You made a choice. Silence again. She stepped closer, tried to reach for my hand. I didn't let her. Don't, I said. You don't get to burn a house down and then offer me tea in the ashes. Her lips tightened. I lost everything, she whispered. I nodded. You threw everything. You didn't lose it. She looked around the room one last time, like she was trying to rewind time by force. Then she said, almost under her breath, he told me you'd never have the guts to leave. I smiled, just a little. And now you know what happens when someone bets against me. She walked out, didn't slam the door, just closed it gently. But that quiet click. It sounded like a war ending. It was Monday when the whispers started. Not to me directly. People don't approach you when they think you're the villain in someone else's story. No, they do it passively. They post vague status updates. They text mutual friends. They fish around with harmless questions like, hey, is everything okay between you two? When they already know it's not. And sure enough, the narrative was shifting. Suddenly, I was the one who'd changed. I was cold lately. I was obsessed with control. Her story was taking root like weeds in every circle we used to share. Yoga group, office parties, the neighborhood social thread. I even had someone I'd once helped move their couch at midnight, message me to say, I always thought she seemed too good for you, man. Hope you're healing, though. Too good? I sat there staring at the message, the irony thick enough to drown in. She wasn't just rewriting history. She was painting a mural over it. So I did what I never thought I would. I met with Liam. I found his real name. Didn't take much. One of her everything you need files had a driver's license photo with a name that wasn't Liam, and an address that very much wasn't hers. I didn't go there to fight. I went to understand. He was working at some low-rent car wrap place, tucked between two vape shops in a strip mall that looked like it hadn't seen a power wash since 2011. I waited until he came out back on a smoke break. He clocked me instantly. "Let me guess," he said, not even flinching. "You're the husband." I nodded. He looked me up and down and smirked. That same flex in the mirror grin I'd seen in the footage. Then he blew out smoke and said, "She's good at making you feel like you're the only one, huh?" I didn't answer. I wanted him to talk. And he did. He told me about how they met at a wellness retreat that was really just a weekend bender in Arizona. How she told him I was checked out, emotionally abusive, even a little scary sometimes. She painted herself as some tragic heroine trapped in a loveless cage. He played along at first, said she was fun and wild. But even he could see she had an addiction to attention, to chaos, to being wanted by everyone in every room. "She used me," he said eventually, tossing his cigarette. "But I let her. I thought I was playing her too, until she started making plans." "What kind of plans?" I asked. He shrugged. "Big ones. Scary ones. Like she was building a new life and I was just the starter kit. She wanted money, status, control. And when she found out I didn't have any of that, she ghosted. And just like that, the air shifted. We weren't rivals. We were two different idiots who'd both been fed the same sugar-coated poison." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "She's not done, you know?" I stopped. "She'll come back," he said. "They always come back when the story stops working." And right then, I realized what part of this wasn't over yet. It wasn't her. It was my silence. And I wasn't staying silent anymore. The moment I stepped back into the house, something in me had changed. Liam's words echoed in my head like an omen. "She's not done. She'll come back." He was right. That wasn't the end of her. It was just the pause. Because people like her, they don't lose quietly. They spin, twist, and weave until the lie becomes so loud, the truth drowns in the noise. So I made a decision. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, and to be absolutely bulletproof when she circled back. I opened that black box again. Her confession gift. A mix of desperation and miscalculated trust. It wasn't just dirt on her. It was a roadmap of who she really was, laid out in texts, voicemails, notes scribbled in a manic haze. People she lied to, people she owed, people she promised things to while still married to me. But one name stood out. Ethan. I'd seen the name before, in texts, in random mentions, but I'd always assumed he was a coworker. Just background noise. A friend. But in the box, there was a printed flight confirmation. Her and Ethan. 2 months ago. Same weekend she told me she had a women's retreat in the mountains. I traced the timeline, backtracked her lies, matched messages to locations. And sure enough, the whole thing unraveled like an old sweater. Ethan wasn't just a side piece. He was plan B. In case Liam didn't work out. She had tears of betrayal. Fallback men. Soft landings. I called him. Didn't text. Called. He answered fast, voice sharp. Nervous. "Hello. This is Alex. Her husband." Silence. Then, look man, I didn't know. I swear. Relax. I'm not here to threaten you. I just want to know what she told you. And so he told me that I was cruel, that I monitored her calls, that I refused to let her work. She'd spun him a whole fantasy of emotional imprisonment, claiming she was planning an escape, saving money in secret, trying to reclaim her identity. "She cried when she talked about you," he said. "Said you'd ruin her if she left." I laughed, a humorless sound that startled even me. "She already tried," I said. "But she forgot I'm not made of glass." We talked for 20 minutes. By the end of the call, I had everything I needed. Ethan wasn't blameless, but he wasn't her partner. He was her audience, her mirror, her safety net. When I hung up, I felt awake. All this time, I thought she was just reckless. But she was systematic, strategic. She never just cheated, she constructed infidelity. Brick by brick. And I was done being her foundation. That night, I sent the box, scanned and copied, to her parents. Not out of spite, but because they'd always seen her as this glowing, misunderstood artist. A victim of a cold, modern world that didn't get her. I figured they deserved the truth, the real daughter they raised. She messaged me an hour later. "What did you do?" I replied with 2 words. "Told reality." And then I turned off my phone. Let her sit in it. Let her feel what it's like to have the narrative ripped from her hands. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. The next morning, my phone lit up with calls from unknown numbers. Then came the emails, long, rambling, all-caps messages from her mother, her cousin, even a guy I vaguely remembered from her art show 3 years ago. They all had the same tone. Confused outrage wrapped in shallow concern. How could you expose her like that? She's fragile, Alex. She's going through a hard time and you're making it worse. I didn't respond to any of them, because now, for the first time, I understood the game. She didn't care about damage. She just didn't want to be the one holding the match when the fire got out of control. But it wasn't just her family. One by one, the people she'd poisoned against me started peeling back. Kayla, her supposed best friend, messaged me late at night, short and careful. I didn't know it was that bad. I'm sorry I believed her. Then, a neighbor. Then one of my coworkers, who admitted she tried to block me from getting a promotion last year by spreading rumors through my wife. It was like a layer of fog lifting, one person at a time, and all of them realizing the same thing. She wasn't just manipulative. She was dangerous. But the real storm hit on Thursday. She showed up again. This time, it wasn't the doorstep. It was my office. Middle of the day. No warning. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked, pale as paper, and whispered, "There's a woman here saying she's your wife." I stepped out and found her standing there in the lobby, arms crossed, sunglasses on indoors, like some dramatic indie film entrance. She looked polished again, controlled, like she'd rehearsed this in the mirror. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Not here," I said. "You don't belong in this part of my life anymore." She forced a smile. "It'll just take a minute." Against my better judgment, I led her outside. She stood by the railing in the parking lot and looked out at the skyline like she was the main character in a movie no one else was watching. Then she turned and said, "You ruined my life." I just stared. "You didn't have to involve everyone," she hissed. "You could have just let me go. Quietly." "No," I said. "You don't get to design your exit after setting the house on fire." She stepped closer, voice lower. "You think you won? All you did was make me look like a victim with a crazy ex who stalks people." "You are a victim," I said, "of your own choices." Her face twisted, just for a second. That mask was always so tight, but it was slipping again. Her voice cracked, high and thin. "I had no one before you. I gave up everything to be with you." "No," I said calmly. "You gave up nothing. You borrowed pieces of me, pieces of other people, and tried to build a throne out of it." She blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry, or trying to cry. Then she said it. The line I'll never forget. "I don't lose." I stepped closer. "You already did." And I walked away, back into the building, back into a life I was finally rebuilding with my own hands. One where she wasn't the architect. One where her voice didn't echo through every room. But I knew there was still one move left. One final shift in the board. And she would make it soon. Because people like her never leave without a bang. And I was ready. It came at night. Of course it did. Like every last move she ever made. It came dressed in shadows, desperate, dramatic, and dragging behind it one last string of chaos. I was asleep when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message. "You think you're safe? You think this ends with your version of the truth?" I stared at the screen, not shocked, not even angry, just hollow. Like watching the credits roll on a film that had already gone on too long. Then came another message seconds later. "Meet me, one last time, or I start talking." She attached a photo of me, standing outside my office, from a distance. That morning, she'd followed me, still watching, still trying to corner the narrative, even when the walls had caved in around her. But I didn't take the bait. I'd already learned. With her, every conversation was a trap, every truce a trick. She wasn't interested in closure. She was interested in leverage, in rewriting the final chapter so she could play the misunderstood heroine one last time. I ignored the message. Then I blocked the number. But she wasn't finished. The next morning, she went public. A long, emotionally manipulative post on her social media page. Black and white photo, captioned, "Surviving narcissistic control and learning to breathe again." A carousel followed, quotes about healing, vague allusions to trauma, Not a single fact, not a single name, just enough breadcrumbs to paint herself as the injured party. The likes poured in. Comments too. You're so brave. So proud of you for speaking your truth. Men like that always show their true colors. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't post screenshots or release the audio recordings or share the receipts. Because I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew. The ones who'd watched the game unfold from the sidelines weren't fooled anymore. Her lies landed like smoke in a room where the fire had already burned out. And as I stood there, phone in hand, watching her perform grief she never felt, I finally understood. She would never stop performing. That's who she was. But me, I'd stopped being her audience. So I got up, got dressed, went outside and started a new day. The first real one in what felt like years. No more games. No more stage. Just life, raw and unfiltered, without the poison in my lungs. And if anyone ever asks me what I learned from it all, I say this: sometimes the person sleeping next to you isn't your partner. They're just a well-dressed demolition team. And if you ignore the cracks long enough, they'll smile while the roof collapses. So look for the cracks. But more importantly, listen when the silence starts to feel wrong. Because the truth doesn't shout. It waits. And when it shows up, you better be ready to stop being the good boy before she breaks you.